My ex-husband admitted he only married me for my dad's business, so I exposed his secret and destroyed his plans. It was a cold evening, and I lay in bed, exhausted and drained. My husband, Brian, walked into the room with a strange look on his face. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. I only married you because your dad owns the company, he said. His words hit me like a punch, sharper than anything I had ever felt. I glanced at the sweater I had knitted for him, now carelessly tossed aside on a chair. All the love I had poured into making it suddenly seemed so pointless. I had always believed in our love, but in that moment, the person I thought I knew seemed like a stranger. My name is Emma Carter. I've been married to Brian for 7 years. We didn't have children, but I thought we were happy together. Brian's job kept him busy, but he always made time for me on his days off. I never complained. I spent my time sewing, knitting, gardening, anything to pass the time while he was away. I thought our life was simple, steady, and good. We met because of my father, who was Brian's boss at the time. Brian was charming, hardworking, and my dad liked him. After we married, Brian asked me to quit my job, saying I deserved to relax while he took care of us. I trusted him and agreed. Life felt peaceful. Every winter, I would knit scarves and gloves for him, and he'd always say they were just as good as store-bought ones. His compliments made me happy, and I dreamed of teaching our future kids how to sew. But 3 years ago, everything changed. One evening, as I was making dinner, I suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed. When I woke up, I was in the hospital with Brian by my side, holding my hand. "You'll be okay," he said, trying to comfort me. But the doctor's words were far less reassuring. I had a condition that wasn't life-threatening, but it would last for the rest of my life. It was overwhelming, but Brian's support kept me going. He visited me every day, bringing my sewing supplies to keep me busy. Teaching him how to sew became a fun distraction, and for a while I believed we'd get through this together. But as months passed, Brian's visits became less frequent. "Work is busy," he'd say when I asked. I tried to understand, but I spent my days knitting a pair of gloves to surprise him. The doctors said I could go home by the end of the year, and I planned to give him the gloves as a thank you gift. When Brian finally visited after weeks of being absent, I handed him the gloves with excitement. But instead of being happy, he looked annoyed. "Are you still making these?" he asked coldly. "They're just junk now." He tossed them aside and handed me divorce papers. "You'll be out of the hospital soon. Let's end it here." I was speechless. I stared at the scarf I had made for him, realizing he had never even worn it. The love I had poured into our marriage suddenly felt like a waste. "Why?" I finally asked. He laughed bitterly. "Isn't it obvious? I only married you because of your dad. Now that he's retired, I have no reason to stick around." I wanted to cry, scream, or do something to express how deeply hurt I was. But I didn't. Instead, I signed the papers and let him leave. After I was discharged, I moved back to my parents' house. My dad was furious when he found out. "How could he do this to you?" he asked angrily. But I didn't want to be angry. I just wanted to start over. A few weeks later, I went to visit the house Brian and I had shared. To my surprise, strangers were living there. They told me Brian had sold the house months ago. Shocked, I called him. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," he said casually. "The money's yours. Consider it a gift." His lack of care hurt more than words could express. I started looking into the house sale and discovered something important. While the house was in Brian's name, the land it stood on was owned by my dad. With that knowledge, I made a plan. We arranged a meeting at my parents' house the following week. Brian arrived, acting confident. "Let's keep this simple," he said. "I'll take the money from the house sale, and we'll be done." I smiled. "Actually, there's a problem." I handed him a document showing that my dad owned the land. The family who bought the house didn't own the land legally. We could charge them rent, or even ask them to leave. Brian's confidence wavered. "What are you saying?" he asked, suddenly worried. "The new owners are upset. They might take legal action," I explained. "Their dream home has turned into a nightmare because of you." For the first time, Brian looked genuinely worried. "What do you want?" he asked nervously. "The family can buy the land from us," I said. "But you'll pay for it. Or you can buy the house back and pay for the land yourself. Either way, it'll cost you." He turned pale. "This isn't fair," he protested. "Was it fair when you used my illness to climb the corporate ladder?" I replied, "You've taken enough from me." My dad, who had been silent until then, spoke up. "Your actions have consequences, Brian. Everyone at the company knows what you've done. Your reputation is ruined." By the end of the meeting, Brian had no choice but to agree. He would pay for the land and compensate me for the emotional pain he caused. The new family was relieved and able to keep their home. Brian's troubles didn't stop there. Rumors about him spread at work, and he lost the promotion he'd been aiming for. Eventually, he resigned in shame. As for me, I started teaching sewing classes. Sharing my love for the craft brought me a happiness I hadn't felt in years. Over the following months, I found joy in the little things. My classes grew, with neighborhood women and even children joining to learn. One woman even told me my class had given her the confidence to start her own business. Hearing that warmed my heart in ways I couldn't describe. Meanwhile, Brian's life unraveled further. Without the support of my family's connections, he struggled to find steady work. The image he had carefully built crumbled, leaving him with nothing but regrets. One day, I received a letter from Brian. It was short and filled with apologies. He admitted to using me and regretted the choices he had made. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote. "But I needed to tell you that I'm sorry." I folded the letter and put it away. His apology, though long overdue, didn't matter anymore. I knew it was time to leave the past behind. Looking back, I realized losing Brian had been a blessing in disguise. He had taken so much from me, but in doing so, he had unknowingly helped me discover strength I never knew I had. My life was no longer defined by someone else's ambitions or expectations. I was free to create my own happiness. Now, as I sit in my cozy sewing room surrounded by fabrics and tools, I feel a sense of peace. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. And for the first time in years, I'm excited about the future. Whatever challenges come my way, I know I'll face them head-on, with confidence and resilience.